to the RunRX Podcast, where we talk about all things running. As many runners know, it's 90% mental. So join Coach Valerie and Coach Caroline as we go through the mental side of running.
Welcome back to the RunRX Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Caroline. And last week, we kind of teased on this subject. And Valerie, I want to talk to you about it now. Basically, we have found, and you've known this all along, but we had a particular member that was coming back from an injury. And so they just did the practice and walking. That's all he was doing while he was getting back into running. He had these injuries that had nothing to do with the running. And he had some really impressive progress. Can you talk about that?
Mm-hmm.
And like what he did?
Yeah, it was actually really exciting because he came into the program, and of course his first thought was, or his first goal was to run a race. Right. And then again, I don't know exactly his injury. It was completely not even exercise related. And anyway, he could not run. So he reached out, and of course, people's first thought is, well, never mind, or, I'll do this some other time.
Yeah.
And
most people quit.
Yeah, unfortunately,
most people will quit and not do it.
And so we are so Caroline and I were like, don't quit. I promise you, if you'll just do the practice without the running, just the actual standing practice, and then you can walk, we'll teach you the walking. You will get benefit. And then as you're able to run, it's going to just progress into your run. And I'm not kidding, guys. He had already sent in a gait analysis before he got injured. But the first week he was fine. So he had sent in his gait analysis. He had started the training, right? So I had seen his previous run, as he had too. So here he comes back, and then he sends in finally I can run again. Here's my analysis. And guys, it was you wouldn't have known that was the same runner. I mean, it blew me away because
and he hadn't really been checking in either, right? Because he was just doing the walking.
Right.
So here it had been a couple months between them. You hadn't seen any of the work he had done.
Right. You're exactly right.
And he didn't even do it by running.
And this is the best part. And we do get a lot of people injured. So this is what we deal with constantly. So I'm in a state, I tell people I can modify anything for anybody. If you're willing to come in and put work in, right? Because this is the main part of running that we miss out, is that there's actually a running position. There's a posture. There's an alignment to running. And really working on the alignment is the hardest part. We know this. We all sit and we're told to get up more. Like, no one goes to their chiro and they're like, oh my gosh, I say this all the time, but anybody that goes to a chiro has gotten the wrath of how crooked you are, or this hip is off, or whatever, right? And so we're like, and this guy took the time to work on the alignment piece, which everybody works on, by the way. So, however, but because he couldn't run, he was only putting himself in that really great line and then practicing it while he was walking. So when he came back to running, he'd been doing the skill practice. Now, he's going to have to rebuild like everybody else, his endurance and all that. But now he knows how to hold his running. So now it's about that practice. Isn't that great?
Yeah, it's fantastic. Now, we have some program opening up here in October. So that's one way people can work with you. But if I'm new to you, I just got to this, I can go on our YouTube channel and find you teaching how to walk the RunRX method, right? Tell me about that. Tell me about what he did. What makes that different than me going out there for a stroll?
Okay. So it's important to understand that the base of what we teach is called the pose method. And the pose is a word, as we've all heard, pose. So it's funny because Americans like the word posture much more than they like the word pose, or it's used more often. So the challenge is that for me, I say pose. And so if you think of like a yoga pose, is a good way to think about it, right? Like,
and you talk about in your reboot, the figure 4, which is a pose, right? Me making a figure 4. So that kind of makes sense.
Right. But I'll just take it to that next step of what the running pose is, and that there's a walking pose as well. There's a swimming pose. There's a everything pose.
Right.
And I bet, having never, I am not a swimmer, But I bet if I showed you the swimming pose and you were a swimmer, you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. My elbow's up in the air, my other arm is straight out, right?
Right.
So many of these poses we recognize. Golfer, someone throwing a football, right? We recognize so many of these movement poses. However, we really don't talk about there being one for running. And you'll hear all kinds of cues, stand tall, right? I hear that a lot. Quick steps, short steps, I mean, you hear these things, pump your arms, all these things. You don't hear really though, how am I supposed to be holding my body? How do I hold my body weight? And what's interesting is if someone's simply standing up, right? And you look at that person and they come walking towards you. A lot of times, if you know them, you'll know them by their walk or even how they stand before they're clearly in your line of sight, right?
Okay. Yep.
I mean, agreed. Like most people, they think walking is just sticking your leg out to go forward. And then to walk faster, they'll try to extend their legs forward. They'll try to pump their arms, right? It's all about that traveling. So what's really fun, guys, is with pose walking, what we actually teach you is how to balance your body weight, how to work with your own weight through gravity. And you do that by getting into now the walking pose. We have a walking pose, and the walking pose is not the figure four, because the figure four is the running pose. Okay. However, both poses, the legs are different, but the upper body is the exact same. Ears, shoulders, hips stay in line. So the difference in the walking pose is you start with your legs separated, because walking is 2 feet on the ground. Okay. Running is only 1 foot on the ground. It's important to understand that. Much less balance is necessary for walking. So much easier to practice holding your upper body in alignment for walking, actually, than for running. Okay. And so that's what we teach. We teach you how to balance your upper body, how to hold your body weight correctly, how to align yourself. And then the best part is to actually walk. We teach you how to use what's called muscle elasticity and, of course, gravity, rather than putting load or impact on your joints. We teach you how to unload your joints, how to kind of recover your youth, because the elasticity that you gain from using that in your walking as well as in your running, that's what keeps your joints strong.
So basically, if I'm an injured runner, or I'm an injured walker, or I'm just maybe I tried running and it didn't work for me, I felt like I hurt my joints or what have you, I can still start working with us, because as you said, you can modify really anything, and I can do the work. I can put in that time, and it's absolutely not wasted in any way, shape, or form. If anything, it's the same time as if I were standing next to somebody that was running, right? Like if I started at the same time somebody was running, and the first 4 weeks we both did the same drills, and I did them into a walk where someone else did it into a run, we could come out and basically be at the same point, because we both put it in the work. Am I understanding that right?
I would say you were both at the point that you're ready to run. Okay. I wouldn't say if you haven't been running at all, then your next segment's going to look a little different than the person that's been able to run for the first part.
But it's not a waste of my time. And if anything,
no.
It's going to help me recover faster.
Of course. And the important thing to understand is that, like I said, because he was also, and it depends on where your injury is, guys, because what we want to do is get you to where you can run. So at the end, that's the best part, is at the end of that practice, I'm seeing you. You're coming on the Zooms live. You're sending in your gait analysis. So I'm also assessing where you're ready to go. That's the important thing.
But he didn't even do that. He was able to just follow your practice and do without you even checking in, which we don't recommend, but that's some
and to be fair, part of that is because he was working with his physio to get himself to come back. So he was seeing someone like 3 times a week.
Somebody. Okay.
Yeah, 3 days
So
a week. So
that's a good point, guys. He was still having somebody check his form and check in on what he was doing. That's really critical with part of this, isn't it? I mean, that's why we go
right.
to
And
PT.
you know that's the funny part is that part of his back injury or whatever his injury thing is his posture. It goes back to posture. So if you're working with someone, and this is the important thing, like for us to get back into, but the reality is somebody was watching him 3 days a week.
Right.
He wasn't doing this just willy-nilly. And it's important to understand that because perception, awareness, how do I know I'm standing in this line? I need to at least know what to feel. So one of the things I would recommend, if you follow us on your own, which we love that you guys follow the videos and try the tips. I'm happy for you to make sure to check yourself, because check your alignment. You can take a picture of yourself. You can even film yourself. Make sure that you understand that you're holding yourself in that line. It's amazing that we think, sometimes it's me too, you think you're doing a movement or holding a movement, and when in fact there's a little bit, you're not. Yeah. And that's really why people have the coach, or why you go to PT, or whatever it is. There really has to be once you know that you're doing it right, then it's repeatable. But first, how do you know? And I hear that a lot from people when they check back. And I say to them, well, at least take a picture of yourself in the running pose, right? Let's make sure you're holding that line. And you're right. We have thousands of videos. So the content's out there. It's just make sure you don't think, oh, I think I'm doing it. At least check in with yourself. But yes, absolutely. You can walk and get great results as long as you're practicing the work.
Well, and we would love for you to join us in our next virtual clinic that's coming up here towards the end of the month. We would love for you to work with us. But we understand not everybody can, not everybody is able to. But if your reason is, I can't because I'm injured, or I can't because my knee or my feet or whatever, think again, because we have had people come through and still have great success working during that time and doing the same work, just with walking or doing the standing work. So that doesn't have to be the excuse that holds you back unless you choose for it to, and that's up to you. So we hope you guys will share this podcast with your friends and give us a 5-star review. And if you have any questions, email us at support@runrx.fit. That's support@runrx.fit. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining us on the RunRX Podcast. If you'd like to know more, join us at www.runrx.fit. And if you have additional questions that you'd like answered on the podcast, email us at support@runrx.fit.